people also really like something that sounds alive in the sense that it can decay over time. So records don't last forever, but an MP3 file does. It's unchanging, it's clonable, it's fixed. Whereas records do disintegrate over time. So people like that. They like to see something, a sense of aliveness within the music that they consume.
Hey everybody, welcome to For the Record, a casual, mostly unedited conversation series presented by Grey Matter, where we talk to music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice. Today, on episode 38, I spoke with Karlyn King. Karlyn's The Songs or Spells podcast has been called the magical rendition of Song Exploder, and she's a tarot reader for the stars. But she's particularly known for her contributions to vinyl's resurgence in contemporary music culture. She's on the verge of completing her doctorate in the subject at the University of Birmingham, and we chatted about it in depth, from providing a return to musical context to the psychological implications of how record stores are structured, to using the format to create more welcoming and inclusive spaces for all music lovers. Hope you enjoy. It's Karlyn. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think it was a mutual connection that introduced us, Tristra from Rock, Paper, Scissors.
Yeah, indeed. Tristra was on the show a few weeks ago, a month ago at this point.
Oh.
And you were the answer to the question, what other music head should we have on the show?
Yeah.
Which you can prepare yourself for, because I will ask you that same question at the end. But before we get into all of that, we'd love to start with, your story and hear a little bit more about you and, when your relationship with music started.
I mean, that's a great question because I can't pinpoint the exact start point. For me, it's definitely just always been a thing, even to the extent that, people would say things like, why does your daughter like music so much? As if, that was a bad thing, or that wrong with me, or but yeah, for as long as I can remember, I've just been really interested in music, and usually like music that's powerful, music that says something, that's got a message. And I've always been super interested in musicians' stories as well, the backstory to their life and their journey in the music industry. And it did go full circle, because that's basically what I do for a living now, is teach that and write about it and research it and podcast it. So impossible to say the start point, but I mean, it certainly is in my blood. My grandpa was a collector and used to collect records, and then switched to cassette tapes when that became available. And I had people in my family who were like traditional Scottish musicians as well.
Cool. Amazing. Yeah, I'm curious to hear more of it. I mean, did you yourself play music?
Yeah, so I mean, at school I did the usual where you learn like recorder, and and then I said I wanted to play guitar. So I was lucky to get a really great teacher who taught me guitar, and I was able to start a band with like other girls in my class. And that was really the start point in terms of, wow, this is something I could actually do for real, like in the music industry. And we used to play like Nirvana covers and things like that at school shows, and no one knew what it was. And it's really funny because nowadays, Nirvana and anything that we would have called alternative is super, super mainstream now. And the students that I teach, worship at the Church of Nirvana. But back then, me and the girls in our band, we were considered weird and like unusual and a bit odd. So but yeah, it is super mainstream now. And yeah, then I went on to play in other Scottish indie bands. I played in a band called Spy Movie and the Hardy Boys.
Cool.
Who already had a really big following because they were a band in the 80s. and I joined the sort of .2 version when they had a reunion and they went on tour and made an album. And it was funny because it was myself on vocals and also one of their sons on drums. So it was this like next generation of
Yeah.
the Hardy Boys, but it was fantastic. The songs were great. We supported people like Vic Goddard. It was really, really cool. And yeah, I got to go on tour and experience that.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and I'm also curious, because you mentioned your grandfather was a collector,
Yeah.
and just hearing a little bit more um, about his influence on you. And I know that's, like a pretty big component of your work and your study. Like, what is vinyl? Like, and the place that it takes up in our lives and its importance, to music. So I'm curious to hear about his influence and, perhaps like a bit of the music that he introduced you to, and then how that informed your own career path, I guess, once you got more into the industry side of things.
Sure. Yeah. So all I know is that he took up entire rooms with his collection of vinyl,
Hmm.
and that these rooms would be full of records, and it was a lot of like classic rock, and also a lot of folk music, probably like Scottish folk, but also like Irish folk. And my grandpa was a big socialist, so was really interested in like the power of the song, and the song in terms of like galvanizing people and creating social change. And that's something that I'm really interested in as well, in terms of song as power and as political power. And it scares people so much that people censor music in different parts of the world because it's that powerful. So yeah, as far as I'm aware, that was the sort of stuff that he was collecting. He died when I was quite young, but subsequently my dad has introduced me to so much like American blues, stuff like Janis Joplin, BB King. I was lucky enough to go to Memphis last year and go to his club.
Cool.
And a lot of that traditional blues. And yeah, he would buy me books and things like that so I could read about their life story and what their music meant to the world. And I remember, sitting up late to watch music documentaries on TV as well, because I was just fascinated by these blues artists. And I didn't know too much about, the real roots of blues and what it stands for. But all I knew is that it was really powerful music, and that it wasn't easy listening. You had to sit up and pay attention. And these artists had really extraordinary lives, and often quite dangerous lives for the risk of their art, to put their art out there. And yeah, I just got really fascinated in that, and that never really stopped. It just escalated into other genres and styles.
Cool. I love that. Yeah. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about, the work that you do today. And I would love to hear more about it, kind of through the lens of, this music that you're attracted to that is powerful, that is like, meant to galvanize people, and some of, the music that you're perhaps most focused on.
Yeah. So um, I did a psychology degree because I'm really interested in what makes people tick. And the whole time I was doing that degree, I was also playing in bands, and I was doing shows and going on tour. And I mean, the night before my finals, I was doing a show. So
Nice.
it was quite obvious that where my priorities were.
Hmm.
But yeah, I still got through that degree, and then I kind of went and done sort of normal jobs for a while, like different kind of office jobs, but at the same time always being in the music industry. And then the chance came up. Well, actually, I had my first ever tarot reading, and I was told that if I pursue this, the world was mine. So
Wow, big words.
yeah, take the risk, because you're just not aligned where you are. And I was really unhappy as well. So Yeah, so I actually went back to study music and went from like a college student straight into like a master's level course. So it was like, this is my path, this is what I'm doing. And I wanted to look at, I guess, combining psychology as well. I wanted to look at how scenes develop, from not only like a musical, cultural standpoint, but also like a consumer standpoint. What makes us buy physical music? And in Glasgow, there's a few record shops, and they all have a very distinct scene around them. So that's what I did for my master's project, was did an analysis of them and how they tick, what's the dynamics in the store, how is that displayed, you know, aesthetically, musically, how are all these things aligned with the scene? You know, what would be the social faux pas in an electronic dance music store versus like an indie pop store,
Hmm.
things like that. Yeah, and then I moved down to London and started teaching, which was great. Just a chance encounter. I've always wanted to teach. Really, I had quite a lot of time on my hands when I lived down there, because I actually moved out of London into Oxfordshire, and there's not much going on there.
Hmm.
I'm definitely like a city person, and yeah, it was everything just aligned that I was able to then start the PhD, start teaching in London, and I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And my first module was called Sound and Culture, so it was looking at a different style of music every week, analysing the key artists, the key sounds, sonic sounds, the look, the aesthetic, and also what it means, because music's not this standalone thing. It's not like notes on a page and that's it. It's way, way more than that. So I'm really interested in how genres and styles develop and actually start. So to get to teach that was amazing. And we're at a really interesting time in the current music industry, in that so much, I would say like 90% of popular music right now is all derivative of stuff that's gone on before, if not all of it, but
Hmm.
in a super obvious way. You know, I don't really listen to radio, but if I get into like an Uber or something and they have the radio on, all I hear is songs that are essentially pretty much 80% a sample of an older song.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely rife now.
Hmm.
So to be able to tell, like, you know, 18, 19-year-olds, actually that's a song from this era and this is what that era meant, and then they join the dots, is for me super interesting. And it also gives them frames of reference as well. You know, they hear these things now on TikTok and things like that, and they don't know what it means. They don't know what synth pop is. But if I can give them that story of the 80s and the introduction of the synth and things like that, they can join the dots themselves. And my hope is that they can then move it forward into something new. So that was a bit of a ramble there, but yeah. Yeah. What was the question again? Sorry.
I don't I think it was like the impact, and yeah, I was just discussing your work, I think generally. So I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
yeah.
I
So
think you answered it.
yeah, that's really what I love to teach. But I also teach things like research, because my PhD is on UK vinyl record culture. So I expanded the master's project to the whole of the UK, and found these really significant things, like the actual physical infrastructure of the store is super
Mm.
important in terms of, when you go into a store, where are the staff? Are they behind this huge counter, sort of separated off? Or is it a more conversational, you know, like a cafe or something like that? And the shops that are doing really well now have diversified. They have also taken on, you know, maybe like a coffee shop element or a community hub element, where people can go in and feel equal. Because I really found that this idea of, yeah, separation between customer and staff is actually quite detrimental to
Mm.
the store. And also it cuts off a whole audience as well. Yeah, people want to feel safe in the record store. So
Right.
And that was one of the biggest findings, was like around the gendering of the record store historically. So no one had really looked at that since the 90s. And I was able to look at it and see how it's definitely still a thing. But yep. And from a business point of view, not creating a safe space for women in the record store is massively detrimental. And, I had legends of vinyl retail telling me that people have to remember that the customer pays your salary. So why would you exclude people? Why would you make people feel small or not welcome or unknowledgeable? So that has then, because that's such a unique aspect of my research, that's really taken me out to America quite a lot. So there's an organization called Women in Vinyl who are based in Virginia now, and they have like 30,000 people involved. It's a massive organization, and they're doing some really good work out in the States. So I was able to go out to Nashville and present my research a few times, Los Angeles, and really make connections out there, because they're really, really big on this, and the record stores over there are on another level. So that's really, where I want to go next, is extending that research to these major music cities in the US.
Cool. That work is really awesome. It sounds so fascinating.
I know.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear more about like what some of the record stores that have been more successful and are more welcoming, like what, aside from diversification, as you said, like leaning into becoming more of a cafe, et cetera, what are some of the other things that you've seen in some of these record stores to make them feel like they are safe and inclusive and more welcoming to everyone?
Totally. I mean, it's all about the staff as well. It's all about the staff and their attitude. And also, like, you can't be what you can't see as well. So if you go into a store and you don't see yourself represented in the staff, I think that's really important. The only part of the UK where I found that women were seriously running the show was Brixton in London.
Cool.
Yeah, which has a huge reggae and dub and electronic scene. And the stores down there, like Pure Vinyl, Lion Vibes, all these stores, were very much run by women, and often women of color as well. So they were very much the anomaly in the research that I did. And to them, it was unthinkable that women wouldn't have a space in the record store. For them, they were like, this is just normal.
Should be.
Yeah, exactly. But the other findings were that it was very much an anomaly. And I had people report things like being asked if they were lost. Have you just wandered into my store and you're lost? Are you looking for a bathroom? What are you looking for? Which is just crazy. So I feel like those stores in Brixton are really, really leading the way.
Cool. I love that. I need to go. I need to make a trip down, to Brixton. Sounds like. Yeah, I'm curious if you could speak a little bit, even, more broadly to your perspective on the vinyl resurgence. I think like one of the interesting things to me is that like, vinyl was obviously used to be very popular because it was the primary format in which people consumed music. It's not like you could choose, a different format through which you could bring music home and bring it into your house. Like it was the thing. And I'm curious what, to get your thoughts on like what this particular resurgence, now that there are all of these options, even, more convenient options, what it means that people are returning, to vinyl.
Yeah, so that was really the question I wanted to answer, and it's a huge question with the PhD. Why do people opt to buy a format that they don't have to buy when they've been given so much choice now? And the global research by the IFPI shows that people consume on multiple formats. So but what I certainly found is that there's a real subjective construct around vinyl. people perceive it as more connected to the artist and the artist's intention. They like the visual aspect of it. You know, we don't even see the cover art on Spotify. You know, we don't look for it. We're not, yeah, and it's tiny anyway. So whereas on a records, you know, you have the full artwork, and that is part of the package. It's part of, you know, it's often very, very intentional in terms of the music. You know, if we think of these classic covers like Sgt. Pepper's, for example, or something like Dark Side of the Moon, these things are iconic for a reason, because they resemble what was going on for the artist at that time and what you're going to find on that recording. And people also really like something that sounds alive, in the sense that it can decay over time. So records don't last forever, you know, but an MP3 file does. It's unchanging, it's clonable, it's, yeah, fixed. Whereas, yeah, records do disintegrate over time. So people like that. They like to see something, a sense of aliveness within the music that they consume, for it to have that personality. And people the opposite, and felt that, you know, high resolution WAV files were the peak listening experience, because you had the full unchanging experience. So really the ultimate conclusion is that it's personal preference, but there's so many social constructs assigned to vinyl that we don't have with streaming or even cassettes or CDs. These things don't carry that cultural weight that vinyl does. And among the younger consumers that I interviewed, it was very much a visual thing, in that they would have it hanging on the wall, and they most likely wouldn't even have a record player. That record would never be used. It was just much more the aesthetic, and it was artists that they felt connected to. It was often people like Amy Winehouse, and a lot of rock stuff like the Foo Fighters and a bit of Kings of Leon, things like that, that they considered, you know, they were a bit too young to be there when it first came out, but to them it was considered really cool.
Totally. No, I love that. I mean, it, you know, this kind of return to context, you know, on one hand, in, you know, places like Spotify and other streaming platforms have really decontextualized the experience of music in, you know, in many ways.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that kind of return, you know, to something alive, like something more human, like, you know, like you're talking about. And I imagine, you know, especially now in the face of AI, and it's like these tools get to become, you know, they are becoming better and better.
Yeah.
That interest in something alive and, you know, something tactile and tangible will continue, you know, to grow, I imagine.
Definitely, as AI becomes more of the norm, because it's still a relatively new thing. I know it's been around for a long time, but yeah, in terms of it being good and useful, it's yeah, I mean, at the moment we've just announced that students can use ChatGPT on their assignments, but in the context of to make them better, not to write it for them.
Right.
Really hard to police.
Yeah.
Really hard to police.
It's a really, it'll be an interesting transition, because obviously AI isn't going away. ChatGPT is not going anywhere. Like it'll just kind of create a new baseline, I guess, for what not only students but anyone who's creating anything, you know, will have. And we just kind of have to assume that everybody has access to this tool. And it'll be interesting to see like what people build on top of that, you know, that kind of increased access, and how it compares to, like, you know, other moments, you know, I guess like using music specifically, about like introduction of the DAW, you know, something like that, where all of a sudden you didn't have to go to a music studio anymore. Now you could do this, and now all of a sudden, like, that increased access means more of everything, but more accessibility to people who couldn't access these places, you know, before. It'd be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. I find it a little bit scary.
Me too.
yeah, I think it can definitely be used for malevolent purposes.
Hmm.
But I hate the idea of it taking away, learning to read and write to a good level. I really object to that. We're already seeing that. People write an email in the way that they would send a really abbreviated text message. I don't like that personally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either. I mean, I think there are some, to an extent, convenience kind of uh makes less necessary, unfortunately, like some pretty key components of our like of our brains, like Google Maps. The
Yeah,
fact that we don't have to know where we are in the world has, started to increase, like the parts of our brain responsible for intuition. And the more and more that we lean on technology to do these, types of basic skills, I feel like the more will change, and evolve or devolve, depending on how you look at it, which is kind of a scary thought.
it is. It really is. Yeah, which is why I'm still very much flying the flag for read books, students.
Yeah. Read books and buy vinyl. uh, cool. Um, cool. Well, I would love to transition. It feels like a good point to segue into kind of part two of of the conversation. Um, and for context, so in the background, we're like keeping track of all the different music mentions that are brought up in each of these conversations, and we're like storing them in a database and working on building out this kind of interactive neural map that people can engage with, that in which the music and the entities, the artists, everything that is mentioned in these conversations is used as kind of the connective tissue
Yeah.
between people. um so uh to begin, I would love to understand how how you discover music today, and if you could answer kind of through the lens of curators and different outlets and platforms that you interact with.
Mhm. Yeah, so I still very much like the record store. No surprise.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think when you find a store that you like going to, you like to go in and have a chat and that you feel comfortable in. Yeah, I would very much go on their recommendations. They will have, new releases on display, so I can take from that and also just chat to them about music and what are you listening to. So that very real three-dimensional conversation, I would say, is very much still how I discover music. But also, of course, I use Spotify. Of course,
Mm.
I do all that. Of course, I use YouTube. Um, and what I'm actually finding is that Spotify recommendations have got really, really good. I don't know if they've changed the algorithm recently, but what I'm finding is that it's spot on at the moment.
Mm.
So, I mean, for example, what was I listening to? Oh, I was listening to it's just a new lease of life, Murder on the Dance Floor by
Uh,
Ellis Baxter.
uh,
I just really was curious to listen to that song, and immediately the algorithm gave me a cover version of it by a really great young new artist from Australia called Royal Otis, who are amazing and who this cover version has just blown up on TikTok. So now they're from this kind of small unknown artist to like touring, they're playing all over the UK and the US. So
wow.
um, in that sense, I think the algorithm's really great. It can definitely detect, the tone of what you want to listen to. And sometimes when I open it up, they've started using an AI feature saying, put in
Mhm.
what, general moods like after work drinks or whatever it is, and it'll give you this playlist. I think it's pretty good. So I'm definitely using that a bit more. But I still just like putting something into YouTube and just seeing what comes out. I don't think that's quite as good as Spotify.
Yeah, it's interesting, playing around with like the randomness and just kind of seeing what. I mean, I certainly think there is a place, for an algorithm, because it's going to serve you things that you wouldn't find otherwise, in the same way that human beings are going to serve you things
Yeah.
you wouldn't find otherwise. And yeah, I feel like there is a place, there's like there's a happy medium like in there that we haven't quite found,
Mhm.
of kind of using the best of both. But um yeah, I mean, they both, have an important place in, music discovery at large, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes they signpost as well. So people are calling that like, symbiotic consumption, in that, I could open up something on Spotify and then it'll say buy the vinyl here. So yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, once you can make that connection and actually start to capture the value from those moments of,
Yeah,
like algorithmic discovery, or like any type of discovery, that's, that becomes really powerful, I
yeah,
think.
definitely.
Um, okay, if you could remember the first album you ever purchased and then the most recent as well.
You just cut out there for a second. Could you say that again?
Sorry, yes, if you remember the first album that you ever purchased and then the most recent as well.
Okay, this is going to be really embarrassing. So I bugged my dad to buy me the Right Said Fred album.
Yeah. That's not that embarrassing.
Uh,
No judgment on the show.
I think, as a kid, I didn't get the context of what they were saying about it. I just thought it was really funny pop music.
Hmm.
They looked funny and I liked it. Um, and yeah, I remember he bought me that on cassette. I used to play it in the car going places, and I probably drove him insane, to be honest. I would just be putting this Right Said Fred album on repeat. I remember it had a really distinct case as well. It was red with yellow writing,
Mm,
like really
cool.
large yellow writing. So memorable.
Mm.
The last album that I bought, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Most recent one.
Do I have to have paid money for it, or
Well, I mean, if you went to a record shop and you stole it, maybe don't, maybe don't. You don't want to talk about it on the show, but I mean, if it was like, if it was like given to you or something like that, I think
yeah,
that,
yeah.
I,
So
I think that
that
counts.
yeah, that's happening quite a lot now. So on my last trip to Nashville, I got given so many free records that yeah, I had to get another baggage allowance to come back.
That's a good reason.
Yeah. So I do get gifted quite a lot of records now. The last one that I bought, oh, it was it was the new Beyonce album. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
yeah. Her new country album,
Mm-hmm.
Renaissance Part Two. Yeah. Um,
Cool.
that's what it was. The vinyl is incredible. The artwork on it is awesome, and it's for vinyl lovers. It's a really heavy album, and there's a lot of effort went into that. So anyone who thinks that her fans just stream for free are wrong. That is a collector's item.
Cool. I like to hear that. So she also, is part of the vinyl resurgence,
Completely. Yeah.
vinyl renaissance, if I may say.
Renaissance, 100%. And obviously Taylor Swift. So I spoke
Hmm.
on Women's Hour for BBC about how she's really bringing records to a new audience who have definitely been, forgotten or excluded in the vinyl record store. And a really good record store would not have an issue with that. I don't personally sit and listen to Taylor Swift, but I have no issue with young girls buying her albums on vinyl, because
Totally.
would you, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the more we can get people to pay for music again, I mean,
Well,
we
exactly.
win.
Exactly. It's slowly clawing back, but it's nowhere near what it was pre-Napster. Nowhere near.
Yeah, it's hard to envisage a world where we ever get close to that again.
Those days are over.
Yeah. Um, cool. Okay. would love to hear about 3 artists of note that you heard for the first time in the past year-ish.
Oh, great. That's a great question. I'm just going to open up my Spotify.
That's fair. Most people do.
Yeah. So definitely Royal Lotus
Mm-hmm.
are fantastic. They are a two-piece from Australia. New artists that I've discovered.
They don't necessarily have to be new artists, just artists that you discovered for the first time in the past year.
Right, okay. Do you know what? I'm going to say Doja Cat as well.
Nice.
So I know she's been around a while, but I've heard some of her songs, but I didn't know it was her. And then I only intentionally started listening to her in the past like 6 months, and I think she's really cool. She's really doing something different, and she's pretty fearless as well. And she's done a lot of interesting collabs as well. And the third one would be let's see. No, that's nothing new. Oh, Chris Stapleton.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I kept hearing this song everywhere when I was in Nashville the first time. No idea what it was. And then it just came on Spotify. They're always listening.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And,
Everything's connected.
well, exactly, right? And it's that song Tennessee Whiskey.
Okay.
And so then I was like, wow, this guy's got a really great voice. So then I started listening to his other stuff. He's just got a new album out now. Yeah. So yeah, Chris Stapleton.
Cool. Great. Okay, now here's the big question. You're going to a desert island, and you get to bring 3 records with you. What are they?
Ooh, okay. Oh my god. So I'm gonna go classic. I'm gonna go Nirvana, and I'm gonna go with Nevermind.
Classic, indeed.
Also, R.I.P. Steve Albini.
Oh yeah, and that's
Yeah,
sad.
obviously done the In Utero album,
Mm-hmm.
which is also great. But I think if that was the end of the world, I would go for Nevermind.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
Just because it reminds me of me like starting to learn guitar and things like that. And you know, I'm a little bit too young for like the actual grunge heyday, but
Mm.
again, I was kind of late to the party with it. But it's still, even to this day, that's such a like fierce album, and
Mm-hmm.
you do get criticism. People say it's their poppiest album and all this, but it's still amazing. And I don't think they ever claimed to be anything other than, you know, an accessible band. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's that whole dichotomy, isn't it, of like art and commerce, but the bands that they loved had hooks. So did they.
So they also did, yeah. And
Yeah,
that's what I mean. Sometimes I mean, you need something like that, I think, to bridge the gap.
yeah,
From underground to mainstreams, and it's kind of inevitable. Like these, most undergrounds do, as they get more attention, do start to bubble up, and I feel like they make mainstreams more interesting overall. So
yeah,
it's not bad to bridge those things, I think.
yeah, totally. So I would go for that. And off piste, I'm going to go for Most Def, Black on Both Sides.
Oh, great record.
That was one of the first albums that I heard played through a really big sound system,
Mm,
vinyl, just at some pub in Glasgow or something. And it's just an absolute masterpiece. You know, it came out in the 90s, and it's still incredible. It's also quite prophetic in terms of a lot of the stuff that he discusses on it.
mm,
Um, yeah, I think that's a really amazing album. So if I've got a bit of Nirvana, a bit of Mos Def, I'm going to go classic. I'm going to go Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Nice.
I'm going to go for the Albert Hall album that came out last year.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. So when I went to Memphis, I was invited to the Sam Phillips recording service studio, which is really famous. It's where like Sinatra and Elvis recorded. And I had met one of there's a guy called Jeff Powell who's Takeout Vinyl, and he mixes and masters specifically for vinyl, and he has a lathe and he cuts the records and everything, and he was actually working on that when I went to visit. So yeah, it's memorable that first trip to Nashville, and hopefully yeah.
Cool. I think those are an excellent top three. Yeah, very diverse sounds. I think you'll have like, a lot of good scope, good breadth on your deserted island.
Yeah, for all occasions.
for all occasions. Indeed. Cool. Well, Karlyn, this has been really awesome. I really appreciate, you being here and, your time, energy, your story, bringing that to this and your work. I say keep pushing vinyl. I think it's like a really important piece of tactile, tangible music that can really elevate us from where we've been and where we still are. For those who are listening who want to get involved or go check out more of your work, where is a good place for them to do that?
Yeah, I have an Instagram. It's Karlyn L King, so L for Louise. And I've also got a website. It's just karlynking.com, where all my like academic stuff, podcast stuff that I've done, and other things that I do are there.
Cool, amazing. And then, as promised, as I said at the beginning, I would be asking you the question: what other music heads should we have on the show now that you have been through the ringer yourself?
Okay. Do you know what? I think you should get Jeff Powell on the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
Reach out to him on Instagram. Take out vinyl. He would be fantastic.
All right. Noted. Cool. Well, Karlyn, really appreciate this again. Thank you for being here, and wish you all the best as you continue to go down the vinyl path and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely, and take it out to the US next.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. The next frontier. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, and
Thank
do
you.
well.
Thanks. See you later.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for being here. That's a wrap on another episode of For the Record, a conversation series with all manner of music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. It's a production of Grey Matter and a new Crate Coalition experiment in building connective listening graphs. We stamp every music mention you heard here, from musicians to venue owners to journalists to tech builders to DJs, and in the background, we're mapping these names to form those yet unseen connective threads between people. Want to get involved? You can check out our website at greymatter.fm or come hang out in the Crate Coalition Discord. See you next time.